that's exactly it, because it does bias you straight away. I've had that experience before when I've seen something and gone straight to the literature, and then I've thought, did I see that feature? Didn't I see that feature? And then, oh, is that something that I've seen in the illustration or photo in the book, or is that something that I actually saw? And it gets mixed up, and that's just the way memory works. But it's yeah, definitely good to be thorough about it. Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. This is a brand new season 3, and if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little bit of a brand new look here, which hopefully looks cool. And so I'm excited to get back into the joy of birding after a little bit of a break. And yeah, thanks for being here. I want to dedicate this first little segment to listener shoutouts before we get into the episode. So this week's listener shoutout is to Bronwyn Woodward. So she emailed in saying, "Thank you so much for your podcasts. They are truly wonderful. Not only are your guests informative, entertaining, and amusing, so too are your stories of your birding adventure through life. I would like to hear more about you in your podcasts." So that was really nice to receive and read that. So thank you very much, Bronwyn. Glad you enjoy the show. And if anyone listening wants to write in as well, you can do so. Just write to birdingtoday@gmail.com. I've also got a quick announcement to make, which is quite an exciting one. I've just launched a Patreon for Birding Today. So if you want to support the show and take an extra step to help me out, that would be really fantastic. There'll be a video that'll explain it in more detail. But yeah, just wanted to do that bit of housekeeping here, just to let you guys know. So let's get into the episode. Today's guest grew up and currently lives in Sydney, where he works as an ecology researcher at the University of New South Wales. When his grandparents first moved to Australia, they bought a house in Hawke's Nest on the New South Wales mid-north coast, where he was lucky enough to spend a lot of his childhood exploring the natural world. Over the years, through a combination of exposure to plants and animals, curiosity, and encouragement from others, his interest quickly shifted to a passionate obsession, which he is now attempting to turn into a career focused on protecting, conserving, learning, and teaching people about birds and the environment in which they are found. Good stuff. His birding and work have taken him around much of eastern Australia, particularly within New South Wales, as well as overseas. He is particularly interested in seabirds, which will be the focus of his PhD. Fascinating. He spends many hours on the cliffs of Sydney's eastern suburbs seawatching, as well as suffering through many seasick hours on Pelagics. He is also a keen user of eBird, ensuring no feral pigeon goes unrecorded in an LGA he hasn't listed in yet, spurred on by his mates in the Dodgy Drongos Twitchathon team. Epic. So, please welcome Simon Gorta on the show. How are you doing, Simon? Thanks for coming on.
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. It's a beautiful sunny day up here in Coffs Harbour, so yeah, things are looking good. And I mean, after all the rain we've had, it's nice to have a bit of a break. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. What about you guys down there? How's the weather holding up?
Yeah, it's sunny at the moment. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, but nothing on the scale of what was seen further north, and even just around here in the last week or so. So it's a good break from that.
Absolutely, yeah, and hopefully the worst is over. But I think this is going to be an interesting episode because I'm excited because always after a break between seasons, it's like, oh, I miss doing the podcast. Like I want to talk about birding more with other birders who are passionate. So talk to us a little bit. I know that in the introduction that I just read out, you started birding and being interested in nature very early on. But talk to us a bit about how that really happened. So was it mostly the environment where you lived or the people that you were surrounded by that helped you grow into the passion, or what exactly happened there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to pinpoint for sure. But yeah, as you mentioned in the intro, I spent a lot of time up in Hawke's Nest through my childhood. And I reckon that must be one of the most biodiverse places, Mile Lakes area, in the state. It's just, there's so many different habitats. The more I looked in a field guide, the more I discovered there were more things out there. And then I just go out regularly I would just go out, see a picture of, say, a scarlet honeyeater or something that I hadn't seen before, just go out and say, I'm going to go try find this. And then lo and behold, that place is just full of them. And I would just see a new bird like that. And then I don't know, there are other times where I remember one time, I think it was only 2014. I went for a walk with my parents in the rainforest there, and we happened across a spotted tailed quoll just hunting in the middle of the day. And yeah, just stuff like that. Dingoes just running through the yard, koalas in the yard, that sort of stuff. It's hard not to, I think, get interested that way. And my parents definitely supported that interest. I think probably most parents would, if their kids getting keen on nature. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
for
probably
sure.
how it begun. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting to know because yeah, a lot of us start out that way, really young. And that's how the kind of passion grows over time as well. And listeners will notice that I kind of swap the questions around because I usually start with what brings you the most joy in birding. Like, is there an aspect of birding that you really find engaging above others, or is it like a variety of aspects of birding that bring you joy?
Yeah, it's probably a variety of aspects. I love going to like little, I guess you'd call them patches, although some of them aren't so local for me. So there's nowhere I kind of feel more at home birding than up in Mile Lakes National Park or just the Great Lakes area in general.
Yeah,
But also I love going to Maroubra, just sitting on a cliff for a day, even if it's a quiet day. It's just a very calming experience, and there's seabirds right there. And but yeah, I also I love going to new places. I love traveling, and being surrounded by a whole community of birds or a whole habitat type or something that's just completely foreign to me, and I get to just learn it all and see new things everywhere I go. So yeah, it's probably a whole, there's a whole mix of things really.
yeah, no, there is like there isn't. It's often the case with birding that there's a variety of kind of different things, and on different days you get joy from different aspects of birding. Like, on one day, I was up the other day up in Sherwood Nature Reserve, close to
Yep.
Woolgoolga here, and you know, I just I think on that particular day, I just wanted to be in nature and surrounded by the forest because it's not a lot of people go up on the eastern edge of sorry, not the eastern edge, the western edge of Sherwood Nature Reserve, and it's so remote and you feel so encapsulated by nature and sheltered by nature, and that's
Yeah.
and that's kind of a branch of birding, being in nature. And
Absolutely.
on that particular day, it was like, wow, man, like yeah, it's so important to have that time in nature to reboot. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And just when you're sort of, it doesn't matter where you are, just finding some little back road or track that you haven't explored before, just wandering down it and seeing what's around.
yeah,
That sort of exploratory birding is probably my favorite type. You just drive past a tiny patch of woodland on the highway, and you think, what, I'm just going to turn around and stop and see what's in here. That sort of stuff. I love it. Yeah.
no, for sure, for sure. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. It's a great when you move, especially I find this when I move to a new area because I've moved around quite a bit for various reasons, but it's a great way to explore your local area, and to get a feel of which towns are where and kind of the geography and topography of the area. And birding kind of gets you out and it gets you in
Yeah.
the exploring mode, and that's another
Absolutely.
part. That's another part that I
Yep.
enjoy. Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
And so you and also I was just going to mention I might be jumping the gun a bit, but about finding these kind of random patches of birding hotspots. Sometimes on eBird you get these hotspots in the most random places, and it's so cool. Like, and on the side of the
Yeah.
road, on the side of the highway, and GPS coordinates, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep. No, absolutely. That's yeah. I think you were hoping to talk about that a bit later, but yeah, that side of things is somewhat addictive from my perspective. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And so you mentioned seabirds just a few minutes ago, and you say that you're interested in seabirds. Are you interested in seabirds above all other birds? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, I think they're probably my sort of favorite group. Though that's not to say that there's plenty of other groups that I love almost as much.
You're right.
But yeah, I guess I find them a sort of challenge. It's something new. They're hard to pin down for sure. There's a lot of time involved and patience, and sometimes you get lucky and it's brilliant. And in terms of trying to find a new bird, but even just watching things like wedge-tailed shearwaters, which are probably the most common seabird here in summer. Just watching them fly over the waves, even in a massive storm, they're just, yeah, super elegant, just able to minimize the effort they're putting in and just use the wind and the troughs and things in the swell just to move around. It's just amazing the areas that they live and how they can survive. So yeah, I guess that's probably why I guess self-declared obsessed with them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I see what you mean about that. And they have a kind of mysterious angle to them that perhaps other bird families don't as much, because
Absolutely.
they live in such amazing, vast swathes of the ocean, and you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of species we don't actually know for sure where they breed, and you know, and how they do it. It's just, there's so much to discover.
Yeah.
And so this fascination with seabirds, I guess you carry that out by probably two main things, which is pelagics and land-based sea watching, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'll start on sea watching, which is what I can do the most of, obviously, because it's much cheaper and more accessible. So yeah, I go down to the headlands around Maroubra, or if I'm elsewhere on the coast, I'll just go and find a headland if there's a big storm that's coming up, and try find somewhere that's sort of sheltered from the rain and wind as best I can. And yeah, just sit there, watch what comes past with the scope. And yeah, I just particularly love sea watching because it's I guess it's just an easy way to get a fix. It's just that the seabirds are often right there, just flying past, and it's just brilliant to be able to have access to those sorts of birds. And I think around Sydney, there's or at least at Maroubra, I think it's particularly good. I think it's mostly just because of the access we have to caves, or there's like a World War II pillbox that we can shelter in, and that sort of thing. So I think that shelter provides probably ends up providing better views, because the scope isn't shaking around. We're not getting sodden and wet all the time. So yeah, I guess that's sea watching. And yeah, I go out pretty much anytime I get a chance, when there's southeasterlies or we get an ex-cyclone coming down or something like that. I just go out to see what's around, and I love it. And yeah, pelagics a bit harder for me because I do get seasick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I probably get seasick about a bit under 50% of the time.
Wow.
And yeah, I haven't quite worked out the pattern to it, because I've been out off Eagle Hawk in some pretty rough conditions and been absolutely fine. And yet I've been out off Sydney or Kiama in swell that barely exists, and just been on the deck the whole day. So I'm
Wow.
still working it out. But I think I'm too obsessed to give it up. Yeah, I'm trying to sort it out before I do a sort of overnight trip. But that's definitely the plan in the future at some point to manage that.
Yeah, and I guess you take the motion sickness pill before boarding every time, right? Or is it sometimes people take
I
it? Yeah.
I take a concoction of things, um, and it definitely works better than not taking stuff. And I find the particular concoction I take is better than just the sort of Travacalm sort of instant release. I've got a patch that's sort of a constant release that I can put behind my ear,
Oh, wow.
and antihistamines and things like that. So the whole shebang, and I'm still trialing new things before I try prescription drugs. But yeah, it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times, but it's all worth it for me. So
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I've never been sick enough to miss a bird, even if I'm, really badly sick. If something goes past, I'll put my head up and
Power
risk
through.
the chunder for it. Yeah.
I wanted to loop back on something that I thought about before when we were discussing, particularly where you watch from Sydney, like the Sydney area is really good for that, because a lot of our listeners are in Melbourne, and arguably the city of Melbourne is less well positioned for land-based sea watching because you've got the bay, and you've got to
Yep.
kind of drive outside of the city to kind of get to real ocean habitats.
Yep.
From to watch from land. So that's I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting perspective
Yeah.
because Sydney's right on the
Absolutely.
coast. Yeah.
Yeah, Sydney's right on the coast. The shelf isn't too far away. I don't know how much that plays into it. We definitely have birds like Providence petrel, which very rarely come inshore. And yet grey-faced petrel do. Yet both of them are typically what you'd consider shelf birds.
Hmm.
Um, Same with long-tailed Jaeger as well. We get them in close a lot, but on pelagics, I've rarely heard of people getting them too far inside of the shelf. Um, they're definitely more common out there. So yeah, it's a bit of a mix.
Hmm.
But definitely just not being in a bay, not having the Bass Strait there, that helps. Up in Newcastle, yeah, a friend of mine has a lot of frustration with sea watching up there because I think there's a bit of a bay there where they are a long way in from the shelf, and if birds are heading north or south, they're going to sort of cut across it rather than come in. It's hard to be sure that that's exactly why, but they really don't see much off Newcastle, despite the ocean kind of being right there.
Uh-huh.
Whereas off Sydney or just a bit further north of Seal Rocks, or even on the Central Coast at Nora Head or somewhere like that, there's a lot more going on. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that play into what you can see from land, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's really a different type of birding, isn't it? And I touched on this with Liam Murphy at the previous episode a few weeks ago. He's into that too, and it's really kind of yeah, a special way to bird. And while we're on seabirds, you mentioned that your PhD in the intro that you sent me is about seabirds. Could touch on that briefly for us? That's interesting.
Yeah, so I'm planning to start in the middle of this year, if all things go to plan. And yeah, the idea is to look at broadly the ecology and distribution of seabirds off, I guess, the east coast of Australia.
Hmm.
So in part, I'll be using bird watching data collected from pelagic trips. So there's really quite long time series of these trips going back, some of them up to 40 years,
Mm.
um, which is a sort of data set that as an ecologist is very, very special, because that's a long time to collect data for and very rare to come across. And nothing else like it exists for seabirds at the scale of, say, Queensland to Tasmania. Um, and so looking at things like how bird communities have been changing associated with climate change potentially would be one thing that I'd be keen to look at, how they respond to perhaps different environmental drivers like sea surface temperature, and how that may differ from, say, up in Queensland to down in Tassie and in the middle in sort of Sydney. Um, those sorts of things, what I'd like to look at with that. But I also have plans to, funding pending, get out to Norfolk Island and try put some trackers on sooty terns.
Yeah.
They're super abundant all across sort of, I guess, tropical and subtropical oceans, and a little bit in temperate areas as well. And they're a really important seabird in terms of being a sort of mid-level predator of small fish and
Hmm.
squid and that sort of thing. Um, and so, unfortunately, they've never been tracked before in the Pacific. That, at least that's been published. There may be some current work going on. And I think it's a really important bird to work out where they go, because they're so abundant and they're obviously quite important both at sea and on land, on the islands that they breed on. So working out where they go, their breeding dynamics, actually how many are on Norfolk Island. We've only got some pretty old survey information on that. So sussing all of that out is kind of the fieldwork plan.
Yeah.
I guess for the next 3.5 years. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating, fascinating. And it's just like a journey, isn't it? Like a scientific journey.
Absolutely.
And in something like that, some would say a personal journey, maybe, because it's such a close passion. Birding, it can be really quite personal, and so to have that linked with a scientific aim it must be really cool. That's really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to link in my career to something that I really love, and see if I can make it work or not.
Yeah. And I know you also did some work with the polar opposite, inland birds at Sturt, in the Sturt Desert Area National Park. I've been there. I went there in 2014, and it's still one of my favorite trips. It's so beautiful out there. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So what was that about? Did you have to go out in the field and collect data, or?
Yep. Yeah. So I did that for my honors. I looked at how the bird communities out in Sturt and then just across the fence, the dingo fence in South Australia, were coping with the drought, essentially doing bird surveys to work out how many birds were around, getting sort of counts and having a rough comparison of communities when conditions were much better in 2019, which is basically the peak of the drought. I think from memory, there was about 90 mils of rain at the study site over a 24-month period, which is just insanely dry, even for a place like that, which is, it was very interesting to see what was still around, and also to see the stuff that has come back since, because I'm still in contact with the people who run the field station out in Sturt.
Nice.
And hearing about how things have changed. I've been lucky enough to get out there, and hopefully in early April we'll be out there again. So yeah, that was the sort of crux of what I was doing out there, but it involved walking sort of 2-kilometer transects along dunes and then back along the swales in between them, counting birds and getting GPS coordinates where the birds were, and then doing sort of vegetation analyses to see how they were using the vegetation and that sort of thing. But the long and short of it is that there were not many birds out there. So it was quite interesting. But then the tiniest bit of rain fell. I think they had 10 to 20 mils, depending on where in the study area I was, halfway through my study period. And things like crimson and orange chats and even some budgies turned up. Just that little bit of rain was enough. A little bit of green pick growing up, and it's amazing how those places bounce back. And that place is now has been inundated with water a couple of times. They've had huge amounts of rainfall, and it's the lake's full, and it's just such a stark comparison to when I was there doing my honors, it's just an amazing place. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. It's one of my favorite spots in Australia so far. I haven't still so much more to see, but and so now we get onto the kind of meat of the episode, and what I particularly love talking about, which is the drive that we have, particularly maybe as listers and eBirders and LGA state listers or whatever you want to kind of call it, but this drive that we have to build our personal stats and records and tracking our birding journey. So talk to me a bit about how you feel about that. Like what drives you to record every feral pigeon in any LGA you haven't listed. I do the same. I love that. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I reckon it's weirdly mostly driven by laziness. I was very bad before eBird at keeping my own records. I didn't
Right.
have a list until, I don't know, maybe 8, 10 years ago or something. I didn't really have a list that I kept, and then even when I tried to keep it, I just wasn't bothered. And then eBird came along and kept track of everything for me. Even a place I can store photos and things like that. So I thought, why not get into it? And yeah, they've got all these funky features like the LGA maps and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which I love filling in. So yeah, now I'm pretty keen on, like, just the other day I was dropping off a hire car for uni in or picking up one, sorry, in Rockdale, which is an LGA I haven't actually gotten into. It's a tiny little Sydney LGA that I don't think actually exists anymore, but eBird doesn't seem to update those changes, which is great because Great Lakes would disappear, and that's my favorite LGA. But yeah, I just saw, I think, yeah, feral pigeon, white ibis, something like that, and I just pulled over, listed it, and carried on. Yeah, no, it was good fun.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that sort of thing, and but mostly I think I like it because it's a way to explore places that I wouldn't otherwise. There's a lot of not so much in Sydney, but outside of Sydney, there's a lot of areas in New South Wales that I wouldn't otherwise bird in. There's little sort of traveling stock routes and things like that that I wouldn't necessarily pull over in. But if it's in a new LGA, it's just an extra sort of bit of motivation to actually pull over and see what's there and just explore random patches. And all those records go up on eBird, and especially for threatened species, I think it's quite useful
Hmm.
to have those records documented. So yeah.
Yeah. And it is great fun, like you say, to kind of go into your map, especially after a trip or a big kind of event that you've done, a birding trip, and you can kind of see the how it has the yellow going into orange and then red
Yeah.
with the LGA map.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like, and that kind of also illustrates your own life, like the bright red LGAs. Presumably, most often the ones you live in, and then
Yeah.
the ones next to it are kind of orange, and then it gets to yellow when you get farther away.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting and kind of really fun to track that.
Yeah.
And like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and like you say, the eBird app is really kind of great as well because it enables you wherever you are to kind of in a radius to see where the nearest hotspots are, and you can kind of track that. And yeah,
Yeah, I don't use that function too much. I probably should. I've never really used the app for more than just putting in a list.
right.
Yeah, but I have noticed that it is there. I've just never done that next step of actually using it to explore. But definitely seeing those hotspots on there would be handy. Yeah.
eBird is a global thing too, which is really important because birding is a global hobby. So it's good that eBird reflects that too, that it's not just in Australia. And you've birded overseas, I understand. So tell us a bit. I'm interested. I'm always interested in this, in how birding is different in different areas of the world. Not only in terms of the birds, maybe, but in terms of the birding culture, maybe, and the scene and how it works. So tell us a bit about how you found differences and where you've birded overseas.
Yeah, so when I've birded overseas, it's been with some good friends, some of whom are now professional sort of international guides. So it's great to be able to sort of tag along with them because they've got all the sort of details nutted out. They're doing it as a sort of a training trip before they actually guide people formally, sort of thing. And so I guess I haven't engaged a whole heap in say the birding culture of a lot of these places because I haven't been. So I did a trip to Southern Africa
Oh
in, I think it
wow.
must have been 2018, 19, the summer, and it was amazing. But we did it all ourselves. We had the information that we needed, and there wasn't any sort of involvement, I guess, with guides when we were there. But yeah, well, I think what I love about it the most is it's just new places, new people that you just come across, new foods,
Mm.
and of course new birds and habitats. And yeah, there's yeah, just yeah, everything's new, and I love that. And I was yeah, it's just that there's a few things sometimes that are familiar, which is great. And so you can sort of get used to the new birds through that, and then sort of spread out into the completely new, like sometimes it's just a completely new family, or
Yeah.
yeah, and some of the habitat types are just so vastly different. And yet say that the Cape region of South Africa, there's a lot of
Yeah.
similarities between the fynbos and a lot of places in Australia, particularly the southwest of WA. And so it's interesting seeing that similarity, and yet there's no honey eaters, there's sugar birds instead, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So yeah,
I was going to mention this the Cape sugarbird is actually one of my, bucket list birds. It's so cool, man. That long tail, and it's just
they're
such a
absolutely stunning. Yeah.
charismatic bird. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you're on these trips, this is another topic that I like to touch on in every episode because the answers are really interesting. That the balance between photographing birds and also just birding with your binoculars,
Yeah.
because there is a dichotomy here, as Karen Dick put it, and in her episode, which I thought was a really good way to put it, which is you always have kind of the choice of whether to kind of keep looking at a bird with your binoculars or your scope, I suppose, or through a camera.
Yeah.
And so I do a bit of both all the time. And lately, I've actually been kind of more focused on the camera side because I just love the visual aspect of eBird, of putting all your photos on your list and trying to get as many photos of
Yeah.
each species. What about you? What do you kind of lean towards in that
I
regard?
I I definitely lean towards just using the binoculars,
Right.
or the scope. I guess yeah, sea watching is a bit different because often things are so far away that it's not worth trying to get at best a pretty scrappy record shot when you can have a really great view through the scope. Um, but yeah, I've got a I guess it's a large bridge camera, but it's not a big DSLR, so it's something I can easily sling over my back and crawl through somewhere, or just carry it around, and it's light, and so I've often got it with me. It's rare that I'll be out birding without it, unless I'm just sort of birding a local patch or something like that. Um, but I only use it really when birds really present themselves, or if I see something properly rare and I think, oh, I should probably get a get a record shot of this, and so it's documented without any
Yeah.
sort of doubt around the record. So yeah, I guess that's my approach to photography. But I do love it, and when there's an opportunity to get photos, and when you're doing an eBird list, like you said, and you want to have like a lot of the species photographed, absolutely, I'll do that. And when I'm birding overseas, I guess I swing a bit more towards photography because a lot of stuff is new, and I often, if it's somewhere that's got a heap of new birds, I like to have that photo to remind me of that sighting, because sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. There's just that much new stuff, and remembering stuff is often a lot easier if you've got a photo.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I think that's yeah, a broad summary of my approach to photography. Yeah.
It's interesting that you touch on the memory side. It's a great way to keep your memories kind of more. What would you say?
Vivid, or
Vivid. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. And kind of, oh yeah, I remember that. And then you have a photo to kind of remember the moment, which is cool.
yeah,
And also something you touched on as well, which was that to document a rare bird and for the record, because nowadays if you see a really rare bird and you don't have a photo for it, that's kind of not very good, these days, because I
yeah,
don't, you know what I mean? Like when you see if it's a mega rarity, you kind of got to have a photo to prove it, unless you're very well reputed. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. No,
yeah.
I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I had that sort of exact situation. I was at Maroubra in early 2020, and luckily I was with other people, and one of the others actually got onto the bird first. It was a bulwer's petrel that flew
Oh,
south, and that there was a little influx of them at that point in time. But that's the first time that influx was the first time they'd been recorded in New South Wales and anywhere that far south, aside from a record or two in Western Victoria, which is again quite bizarre. But yeah, we were sea watching, and we were all just trying to get on the bird, and didn't manage photographs. So I wrote probably something just short of an essay or paper on when I submitted the rarities report, because yeah, without the photo, it's I guess it's harder to prove to people beyond doubt what you've seen. Whereas the photo, you wouldn't need to put that much detail in if it's a photo that's clearly of whatever the rare thing is.
right.
It's obviously good to include that detail regardless, but you definitely need to work harder on it, at least for saving the effort down the track when you put in a rarities report. Having a photo is definitely preferable.
Yeah, and it's something you can go back to and look at and double check, because when you
Yep.
don't have a photo, all you're relying on is your memory of the
Yep.
visual memory of the bird through the bins or through the scope.
Absolutely, and that can get tainted so quickly when you start looking at photos. I remember when we saw that bulwer's petrel, I after it had flown south, I had a discussion with the other two. It was David Mitford and Robert Griffin, who were with me, and I said, right, we need to get a description of this before we look at any images, any field guides or anything. We need to document exactly what we've seen, describe absolutely everything before we then go to the literature and suss it out, because we were pretty sure it was what it was, but we didn't have prior experience with that species. And so we thought, let's describe absolutely everything. And from that original description, which I could trust because all of us agreed on those features from having just seen it in the field, we were able to then go to the literature and say, this matches. There's plenty of videos online of them and similar species in flight as well, which is just amazing to have that sort of library to compare to and that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
that is handy. But obviously with a photo, you don't have to have as much worry all the time about ensuring that is exactly what it was, and ensuring that people or the rarities committee can be confident that record is a legitimate one and not something very similar. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And it's interesting what you mentioned there, that you said that before going to any of the literature or the archives or the media of the species that you think it is, you first describe exactly what you saw. That's because the urge can be so strong to go, okay, let's go and see how it compares to the others. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, really cool.
That's exactly it, because it does bias you straight away. I've had that experience before when I've seen something and gone straight to the literature, and then I've thought, did I see that feature? Didn't I see that feature? And then, oh, is that something that I've seen in the illustration or photo in the book, or is that something that I actually saw? And it gets mixed up, and that's just the way memory works. But it's definitely good to be thorough about it. Yeah.
And the word you use, tainted, is perfect. I've experienced that as well. It's like, oh, and I'm actually particularly self-critical and self-doubtful, like especially when I don't get a record shot or a good photo. It's like I keep asking myself compulsively, is that what I saw, or maybe it was a light, or and then you get the color wrong, and yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I remember in Liam's interview he touched on it. It's much more important to be right, to make sure that record is legitimate before anything else. And so for me, avoiding that possible issue with memory when you don't have a photo is absolutely critical. So anytime I see something, even if it's I guess it would have to be fairly uncommon if I'm not going to see it again. But if when I'm overseas, if I see something and I don't get a photo and I'm not sure if I'll see it again, that sort of thing, I'll try get that description down before I look at literature or anything like that, so that I I can be 100% that that is what that record is, because I will submit it to eBird, and researchers do use eBird for a lot of conservation science, and other bird science. So yeah, it's definitely important to make sure those records are legitimate.
Yeah, agreed for sure. And getting IDs right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not a deliberate thing necessarily to put down something incorrectly. Like, I guess there's a few people that will make stuff up, but on the whole, it's a misidentification that's going to be the cause of it.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely fine, but it's better to try avoid it if you can. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it happens to, it happens to all birders, I guess. It's, with varying levels of frequency that you kind of miss ID a bird. Like, it's certainly happened to me, and like, yeah, for sure.
I think my favorite stuff up was on a pelagic, actually. I think it must have been off Kiama. I remember there are a lot of Victorians on the boat, which is why I think it was Kiama, because they often come up, or they did used to come up to try to see white-necked petrels most summers. And yeah, it was on the way back, and I saw this white speck way up in the distance, and it's sort of late summer. It's a good time for tropic birds. And I put the bins up. I couldn't find it. I looked, and then I could see this white speck again, and I was like, yeah, stop the boat. I think there's a tropic bird up there. And we must have stopped for about 5 minutes, and then out from behind this cloud flies an Air New Zealand flight. It's miles up in the sky, but I just seen this little speck, and I thought, got to stop for it. I'm pretty sure it must be a tropic bird, and it was a big passenger plane, like it, not even close. Not sure if it was the seasickness, the drowsiness from the seasickness prevention tablets, or what it was, but yeah, it was a special moment. That I don't think I'll forget, and maybe quite possibly other people on the boat won't forget either.
Oh, yeah. Those stories, I love birding is so great because you get those kind of quirky stories of from all different angles. It's just so interesting. Is to kind of reminisce on stories like that in birding, for sure. But just briefly shifting back also to your plans for your career, which was a topic point that we had. What do you hope to achieve down the line, not only as an ecologist, but also for the community, for people? Do you have specific goals in mind in that regard?
I guess it's a bit broad. Overwhelmingly, it's just, I would like to, I guess, just do more good than harm. Sort of leave, if I'm studying a species or an ecosystem, leave that in a better condition, or at least with more information available to mitigate threats or something like that than there was when I started. So that's, I guess, something quite broad, but I think specifically I would, and I guess it ties into that, I would like to be able to teach people and get people interested in birding, in conservation, in ecology more broadly. Just
and how do we do that?
About the natural world. Well, I think there's a lot to be said with for sort of encouragement from a young age. I think early education is key. I didn't have much of a science education. I don't know if it's in the curriculum more now, but in primary school there wasn't a whole heap of science, and I was very lucky to be able to have what I had up in Hawke's Nest, because it was a way to explore that side that I wasn't really getting a whole heap of through my education. And yeah, I think just getting people interested is the first step, and then it's about maintaining that interest. That I don't want to try make people as sort of obsessed as I am with birding. I don't even necessarily think people need to be super into birds. It's just an awareness of the natural environment, of its value to us, because that comes through on so many different levels. If only just for its utility, but also it's that there's some pretty special plants and animals out there, and and things that aren't plants or animals. There's all sorts of things, and it's just I think people getting involved and being aware of what's around them, about, unfortunately, the damage that we're doing, even just by living our day-to-day lives. And I don't think the individual is to blame, nor is the individual the solution. I think it's a much broader issue, and the big changes will come at a much higher level. But there are small things that individuals can do. But yeah, I think that's broadly what I would hope to get out of my career, a combination of trying to fix things, or prevent, ideally to prevent further damage, and also getting people keen and involved.
Yeah. You mentioned young people and maybe shifting to this perspective of new naturalists or new birders that come into the hobby. Like, encouragement is so important, and so I guess what I'm trying to shift onto is would you have any tips for young naturalists or young birders or new birders going into the hobby?
Yeah, so I guess when I was young, I was lucky to have a few friends around me who had a little group. It was called the Australian Young Birders, and I believe there's a different group now run by different people, but presumably with the same sort of aim of getting involved with all the sort of young, I guess roughly school age birders around the country. And so getting involved in a group like that with like-minded people is a brilliant thing to do. I think just exploring your local areas or areas you regularly visit, getting involved with something like eBird, or even things like iNaturalist, just ways to both contribute to citizen science, but also get involved with a community of, I guess to an extent, like-minded people. Of course, there's heaps of different people involved in birding, and some are nice, some are not, and some are interested in very different things. But I think a lot of us sort of have a shared common interest, and that's something that's great. I was lucky enough also to have some older birders who were really keen to show me birding, basically, to get me out and involved, help me get on my first pelagic, and help me get out to see plains wanderers when I was in school and didn't have a license.
Wow.
And that sort of stuff, that just all those sorts of things, it makes such a difference. Just one little experience of where someone, it's not a whole heap of effort for them to help you, but it makes it such a huge difference as a kid. And yeah, I guess just all around, just being inclusive, being just open to meeting a whole bunch of different people and doing a whole bunch of different things when you're out in the world is,
for sure.
Probably it's a bit vague, possibly a bit broad, but
and it's very people orientated. We're human beings at the end of the day, and we're social creatures. So that kind of plays into everything we do, including our hobbies and our leisure time. So it's really important to kind of have that link. And birding friends are real friends. You know what I mean? Like when you have a birding mate, it's like it's the best thing ever.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah, I've got a few people who I try when I do go birding. I like to go birding by myself a lot. I like to just sort of experience birding and wherever I am on my own. But I also really like going out birding with some people. As you mentioned in the intro, my Twitchathon team are brilliant. They're both as crazy as I am, arguably crazier about LGA listing and things like that. So birding with them, and Max, who's one of the people in the team, I've traveled with him overseas. I'll be hopefully going overseas with him in about a month as well. And it's just
Wow. Yeah.
I when you find someone that you travel well with, it's brilliant to do that. To sort of bird with them and do that sort of thing. Yeah.
For sure, it's a bond, because because there aren't, relatively speaking, there aren't many birders in Australia anyway. On Australia, that when you take into consideration the whole population, the percentage of people who are birders is relatively low. I would argue if you compare it to maybe other countries.
Definitely,
Yeah.
you compare it to the UK or the US, and it's we have very few birders, relatively speaking.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the closing questions, which is one of my favorite parts of the show. Which is as you probably know what's coming. What's your favorite bird?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, I don't have a clear. Well, I guess I've got a favorite, but only just, and I think it varies a bit. I think the Gould's petrel is probably my favorite for a few reasons. So just off Hawke's Nest is their main breeding ground, Cabbage Tree Island, off in Australia. That's the bulk of their population breed there. And I sort of always wanted to go out there as a kid, and it's restricted. You can only go out there on national park surveys or other sort of under a scientific license and permit through parks. And yeah, I think it must have been back in either 2016 or 2017. I hadn't seen one before, and I went on my first pelagic off Port Stephens, and I can't remember the count. It must have been upwards of 10, maybe 20 Gould's petrel flying around the boat. And that was my first experience with them. And then I think a couple of days later, I was on a Cabbage Tree Island, a Gould's petrel survey on the island itself. So I saw them doing their thing in what was pretty rough weather, because this sort of squall had come through and all the petrels came with it. And then a couple of days later, I'm on the island at night, hearing them sort of chattering above you, and then just sort of walking around on the forest floor and things like that. It was just amazing, and it was something I had always wanted to see. And I think every time I see them, I just get excited.
Wow. For sure, yeah. So, I see what you mean. Like sometimes there's some birds that you just connect with either because of experience or just
I think it's experience. Yeah. Like there's other things that have been favorites, like black falcons, which I've always loved. Seeing them hunting migratory waders and things and that sort of stuff. It's just amazing. I think we're up in Sturt last year and saw one. There were these flock bronzewings flying around, and there's this black falcon up there sort of sussing out which of them it was going to pick off, and just amazing. And yeah, when I was out at Sturt as well, Burke's parrots in the evenings during my honours, because it was so dry and there was this little bit of water, basically like a grey water overflow, and they used to come in every night and every morning to drink. And on evenings where I got home early enough, I got back to camp early enough to do it, I would just go and sit there and watch them until I couldn't see anything, just coming in to drink. And because I was just sitting still, they would fly in and land only a few meters away from me and then walk down to the water. And just those sorts of experiences, I think, are what sort of defines a favorite bird for me.
For sure. I think experience is kind of the driving factor, maybe, and secondary to that, maybe how the bird actually looks, like the appearance of the bird. There's some amazing looking birds too that really kind of blow your mind. And thinking about that, all the possibilities. Do you have a dream bird, a target bird that's next on your list that you want to get?
Not really. I guess in the immediate future, I'm planning to be in the UK and Scotland in about a month. And the plan is to visit a puffin colony. And I would love to see a puffin, let alone lots of puffins all just sitting on rocks and looking ridiculous like they do. Something I've never seen before, and that sort of thing. But more broadly, I guess I guess some sort of rare seabird, something like a mascarene or Fiji petrel or a magenta petrel, even an Amsterdam albatross, which
Yeah,
is just
wow.
that these things are just they're very rare and a very low percentage chance, even if you're, I guess, aside from the albatross, even if you're sort of right at the sort of breeding area, it can be a challenge to see them, and getting to those places is difficult. So
Yeah,
when you sort of add all of that into the mix, seeing something like that from my sort of, I guess, favorite group of birds would be amazing. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's a beautiful group of birds, isn't it? The whole order, you know, the shearwatchers and
mm,
albatross. Oh, and they're
yeah,
just so the masters of the air. That's what I love. You know, a
yeah,
bird in the truest sense. That, you know, that just
yeah,
an aerial creature. You know, yeah, I
yeah.
just love that. Yeah,
Ab-
for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, and yeah, they've got these weird things, like they're able to sleep while they're flying and sort of do all sorts of stuff like that, and they drink seawater and have salt glands to sort of filter out the salt, like all of these crazy adaptations that have evolved over millions of years to that extreme kind of life, which you can kind of see if you ever go to a breeding colony, because they're so well adapted to life at sea that they come to land, and it's worse than seeing a pelican walking around. Like pelicans are pretty sort of, you know, but you know, Gould's petrel on Cabbage Tree, for example, they'll just fly straight into a palm tree and drop to the ground, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And some of them do die while doing it. Like they, it's yeah. Last time I was there, we saw one that had, I guess, just broken its neck on collision. We
Wow.
found it the next day, and but mostly they don't, obviously, and they, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I kind of got the impression they sort of tried to crash into the canopy and then drop down. But
Yeah.
they're also able to climb trees, which is just amazing. That I watched a Gould's petrel climbing up a palm tree and then jumping off and flying off. And this is a palm tree that's, I don't know, 15, 20 meters tall.
Yeah.
And it was just using its wings and kind of going up like that. Like, yeah, just crazy, crazy birds. So yeah, I think that group of and something rare from that group would be a dream bird, but
Yeah.
I'm not too picky.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You know, that's you got to kind of hope for that kind of thing, and as you say, it's chance. I'm lucky enough. I'm going to be going on a pelagic with Liam, actually, who organised it for the
Oh,
Southwest
brilliant.
Rocks on the
Yep.
27th. So
Yep.
that hopefully that'll yield some cool stuff.
Uh,
Because
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It's a great port to go out of. You don't have to, if you're in New South Wales, you don't have to trek it all the way up into Queensland to see things like Tahiti petrel and Kermadec petrel quite reliably.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
though I don't want to jinx jinx the trip, obviously. But there's been some good stuff around from about sort of mid-February continuing. There's been some pretty
yeah,
amazing stuff, and they got those red-footed boobies, which are not always in New South Wales.
yeah.
And yeah, never know, on the 27th you might well come across some or
Fingers
something better.
crossed. For sure, for sure, for sure. Oh, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm really excited. The anticipation is great. And so,
yeah.
just to wrap up, one more question. And I'm interested to find this out from you. Did you have a specific destination that you haven't visited yet that you really would love to go and bird in at all?
uh I think that there's a lot, but somewhere in the subantarctic is obviously a seabird hotspot. I've been lucky enough to see a lot of the birds that live in those areas, though the seabirds, that is. But some of the, like, those subantarctic snipe and
Wow, yeah,
yeah, various things that are endemic to some of these really isolated islands. That sort of stuff would be, yeah, it'd be brilliant to see a place like that, just so remote, so yeah, like those mega herbs in the New Zealand subantarctic that just look funky as anything, and yeah, just yeah, somewhere like that, I think. But also I'm a sucker for mountains, anywhere
ah,
with proper mountains, somewhere
yeah,
like I don't know, Tierra del Fuego, that sort of area
yeah,
of South America, or yeah, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
There's a
Patagonia,
lot of places. Yeah.
Patagonia is beautiful. I've had the privilege of going there. It's absolutely
Yeah.
mind blowing. And the birds are great
Yeah.
there too. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so many places. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like it would absolutely blow my mind. Just all those new birds, new groups of birds, and the diversity is off the charts in a lot of those places. So, yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
That's it.
well, I would happily go there.
Well, I mean, life is long, and you know, it's most likely we'll have the chance, you know, because the birding, you know, looping back right to the beginning, it's such a great way to explore the whole world, not only your local LGA, but the whole world. So that's a great note to end on. Thanks so much, Simon. You've been an absolute joy. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for interviewing me. It's good to chat.
Righto, yeah, it has been, and I hope to meet you in the field at some point, maybe when we cross paths.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I would be on that Southwest Rocks Pelagic if I wasn't gonna be away so much subsequently, because I love those trips, and Liam's great. So getting out on a Pelagic with him and his crew is always good fun.
For sure, I'm looking forward to it. Alrighty, I'll let you go. Thanks, Simon. See you soon.
No worries. See ya.
Thank you for listening to or watching this episode of the Birding Today podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to stay up to date with the show, you can follow me on all my social media platforms. And if you want to take it a step further and support the show and also get some cool benefits, you can support me on Patreon as well. So again, thank you for listening or watching, and I'll see you in the next one.